Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-Year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to come. While part 3 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime is seemingly still a long way off yet, speculation is rampant regarding what new and extended scenes we might get in the next set of 13 episodes to come. It's been said before that while parts 1 and 2 felt very quick, covering a lot of story in not a lot of time, spanning roughly 130 chapters across 26 episodes, parts 3 and 4 are likely to slow things down a lot, as there's actually only 76 or so chapters left in total, barely enough to cover a single core based on the current pacing of the anime. And the anime team added fuel to this fire recently with a very exciting behind-the-scenes tease, hinting at the dramatically slower pacing of part 3 to come. Last week it was revealed that episode 32 of the anime, or episode 6 of part 3, will be titled The Holy Newborn. What's crazy about this is that The Holy Newborn is chapter 626 in the source material, and considering episode 26, the finale of part 2, only ended halfway through chapter 609, we can glean from this that part 3 of the anime is moving at a glacial pace comparatively to what's come before, adapting approximately a mere 17 chapters so far across potentially 6 episodes. For comparison's sake, by the start of episode 6 in part 1, the anime had already adapted 25 chapters. This means, through rough estimation, that part 3 is likely to be adapting fewer than 3 chapters per episode, which is honestly amazing news, and crucially frees up a ton of room for new material. So, with this exciting new information opening the floodgates of speculation, what new scenes could we be getting to fill the time? Well, here are a few new or extended scenes I'd love to see in the upcoming part 3 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime. We'll be moving through the list in chronological order, going through the core as I assume it will go between chapter 609 to 654 or so, which signals the end of Kyoraku vs. Leal. So, let's begin. We'll be starting with something a little unusual perhaps, but I think the opening of a new core is a great time to introduce some of the more mysterious and mythological elements of the lore that will come into play later. In the same way as part 2 opened with an abstract look at Yhwach's birth and the events of the chapter Godlike You, I think part 3 could open with a vague look at one of two things. Either the creation of the still silver arrow, maybe by bringing Uryu's flashback forward by 50 chapters or so, or a totally new scene that shows the ceremonial blade of the Issei clan, the Shinken Hakyoken, long before it is actually used. Both of these items play huge roles later in the arc, and both of them kind of come out of nowhere. The Shinken Hakyoken is, in my opinion, the more egregious of the two, as at least Uryu and Ryuken's flashback does take place a good 20 chapters or so before Uryu actually receives the arrow, so that's something. But the opening of the core would be a great time to cryptically tease one of these artifacts, ready for them to be used later on. I guess the still silver arrow could be saved for core 4 since it won't be used in this set of 13 episodes, but it's also the more relevant and important item in the grander scheme of things than the ceremonial blade, so I guess we'll see. It would be very cool if they perhaps combined the reveal of the Shinken Hakyoken with the Soul King's backstory and put that at the start of the core. If, say, the magic of the Issei blade, which diffuses the power of God, was somehow involved in the Soul King's ritualistic mutilation and imprisonment. Up next is a scene that we're already pretty certain we're getting thanks to the last trailer for part 3, and that's Uryu vs Senjumaru. I'm expecting this in episode 1 alongside perhaps an extension to the end of Ichibei vs Yhwach. This scene showcasing Uryu taking on the seamstress while the other Schutzstaffel members are trapped or killed by her bankai will be a great litmus test for how the anime plans on depicting Uryu throughout the remainder of the arc. If he successfully kills Senjumaru in cold blood here, thus rescuing his fellow sternritter, then the anime is doubling down on Uryu being a villain. And if you watched my recent video on his character arc in the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime, you'll know I think this is the right move. Not only will it make his turn more convincing in the long run, but it'll finally make good on Yhwach's comment regarding the other Quincy's witnessing Uryu's strength. But how will Uryu defeat Senjumaru? Considering her immense power as shown in the newly revealed battle between the Zero Division and the Schutzstaffel in the finale of Part 2, Senjumaru is absolutely not going to go down without a fight. But Uryu has a few options. The anime has already teased his power of the antithesis, but I think it's likely we will see it in action properly here. Perhaps Uryu even formally reveals his shrift to her. The more exciting option, though, is that Uryu has a Volsten dish and uses it against the Royal Guard in order to overpower her after using his shrift to break free of her bankai. One thing I mentioned in a previous video is that even if Uryu is planning on bringing down Yhwach and the Vandenreich from the inside, him killing Senjumaru feels like a massive transgression that would never be forgiven by the Soul Society, so how do you get around this? The only other option is that Senjumaru somehow learns either of Uryu's true motive or of his role in the downfall of Yhwach and decides to let him win, though that would require potentially an awful lot of trust in him on her part, which feels a little unbelievable. Since it was recently revealed that Senjumaru's bankai does in fact manipulate reality and isn't an illusion, then it seems likely that there is some kind of fate or destiny manipulation woven in there. Maybe Senjumaru accidentally gets a glimpse, not of Uryu's desire to destroy Varvelt, but his role in actually killing Yhwach in the end, and so lets him go. This would foreshadow the Still Silver Arrow, which hasn't yet been referenced at all, unless it's revealed in the manner I just mentioned in the previous entry. After that, like I said, I think Ichibei vs Yhwach may be extended a little bit, but to be honest, what I'd like to see most of all from that is another flashback featuring Ichibei, perhaps from the darkest days of the primordial world. And personally, a great time for this would be when he's killed by Yhwach at the end of their fight in traditional Bleach fashion, perhaps just before he's blown to pieces. The new flashback in episode 24 added so much to that episode and to the story and lore in general, so the more flashbacks the better, quite frankly. And that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this list. Now, moving on to the big guns. Regarding the Soul King, it's time for that flashback too. The anime has already gone further than the source material ever did by showing Ichigo visions of the Soul King's fall, but I want to see it for real. I want a clear look at Ryo himself. I want to learn his name, I want to hear him speak, I want it all. As greedy as that may be, Ryo is still Bleach's greatest mystery to me, and there won't be a better time than Part 3 to learn everything there is to learn about him. The question is, when would that flashback work the best? When does it make the most sense to include in the story? Well, I have a couple of thoughts. The first and perhaps most obvious answer comes in chapters 611 and 612, when Yhwach stabs his father. As Yhwach advances on Ryo, he tells him that perhaps he already foresaw this very day, before plunging his sword into the god's chest. As Yhwach says farewell to his father, the source material gave us a close-up of Ryo's eye, as his son provides a very brief eulogy for the one who saw the future. This moment feels like the perfect transition. Perhaps the camera pulls us into Ryo's eye to relive events from his past, or even just a soft fade into the flashback from that moment would be spooky, but excellent. This feels like the best time for the detailed history of Ryo to me at his moment of death. But the other option is when Ichigo slashes him in chapter 614, which signals the true death of the Soul King as the worlds all begin to collapse back into one, the actual destruction of his core body. This feels a little less likely to me though, as this is an action-packed, fast-paced sequence, and throwing a flashback in the midst of it all will mess with the pacing. So we'll have to see, but either way, this is our chance. It would be very weird for the anime to explicitly tease the Soul King's history and then never actually show it. Come chapter 612, the remaining Gotei 13 fighters all reconvene back at Mayuri's laboratory to prepare for the final assault, signifying the true end of the second Quincy invasion. It's here that we see Shinji Hirako again, for the first time since he and Hinamori assisted Omaida, coming to his aid to fend off several soldat in the wake of Kenpachi being ambushed by the Bambis, before Shinji and the others are seemingly killed by Basby, who used Burner Finger 3 to engulf them in a wave of lava. Except in the anime, that entire scene was cut. Instead, we haven't seen Shinji since he was knocked out by Bambietta's explosion back in episode 17. So, part 3 then is the perfect time to elaborate on Shinji's heroic deeds. In the source material, Omaida simply quickly explains that Shinji used Sakanade in time to rescue them from Basby before they escaped, but since we haven't seen Shinji at all since he was defeated, the anime should use his reappearance to explain everything that's happened to him since, including a real look at a battle with Basby. It's well established that Shinji doesn't have enough to do in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and the original story only made things worse for him by actively skipping over his best moments. Here, in the anime, as Omaida describes the ordeal he's been through, we should actually get to see Shinji take on Basby briefly, showing how powerful he really is before they make their escape. It's a good way to cover everything that's happened to Shinji and the others since the battle with Bambietta, while also giving Shinji a brief but needed fight scene. While Shinji may never get the full fight he deserves in this arc, the anime has already given him a better showing against Bambietta, and now it has the chance to do the same again with his clash against Basby. So, one of the few things we know for sure about Part 3 is that it's going to include extra scenes for Jushiro Ukitake, who will play a major role in the first half of the core. And while that is enormously significant in itself, we have no idea what those additional scenes might consist of. I know everyone wants Ukitake to fight someone, myself included, but considering where he is reintroduced into the arc in the space between invasions, it makes that quite difficult to achieve organically. The majority of sternritter are defeated by this point, and those that aren't don't show up until after Ukitake is already, well, dead. So, what is there to do? The nuclear option is to resurrect a sternritter and have Ukitake dispatch them himself. And who better a choice than Robert Akatrone? Robert should have been brutally killed by Yuhabak's Ausvalen, but he was conspicuously absent at the end of episode 25 when his fellow sternritter were all having their souls absorbed. Now that doesn't mean he's alive, of course, and in fact Kubo drew him a piece of death art, but it is strange. Not only that, but unlike the source material, Robert's name wasn't even revealed in the anime, let alone his shrift. Imagine early in the core, Ukitake is making his way towards the Shinigami stronghold when he's suddenly accosted by a seriously wounded Robert. Robert's name is revealed at last, I dare not hope for more than that, and desperate for some glory he tries to attack Ukitake. Now Ukitake obviously doesn't want to fight such an injured individual, but perhaps he's given no choice, plus Sogyo no Kotawari is the perfect counter to Robert's pistols. It makes a lot of sense, but in reality I don't see it happening. The likelier option is that we simply get more of Ukitake's childhood through extended flashbacks. The glimpse we get of him as a young boy in the original chapter is absolutely minuscule, and there is plenty that can be done there, especially if it means getting more insight into Mimihagi as well, the Soul King's right arm. That way you'll kill two birds with one stone. Perhaps we'll see what life was like for the very young Ukitake, and maybe we'll see his parents taking him to the grotesque one-eyed god, watching as it possesses him and saves him from death in that moment. All of that would honestly be really awesome, and let's face it, any extra scenes for anything related to Reo would be greatly appreciated. If Ukitake is the conduit for that, then that works out for him too. Ukitake has a similar issue to Aizen, who we'll get to in a minute. Both of their appearances are confined mostly to one major sequence, meaning it's difficult to imagine what else they might contribute outside of it. Alright, I'm beating a dead horse with this next one, but I really think it should happen, and that's of course Ichigo versus Uryu. I thought it would happen in part 2, I was wrong. Looking back, it wasn't really the right time. Now though, well, this is the moment. Uryu's treachery has been revealed to Ichigo in full, and the next time they meet will be in the throne room of the Soul King himself, a fitting stage for their clash. Instead of Ichigo just inanely yelling the same things at Uryu over and over again to basically receive no response, I want to see them come to blows in an explosive way. Ichigo can keep trying to get through to Uryu as they fight, but them fighting is what matters. That imagery of the quintessential Shinigami and quintessential Quincy, the two main characters at the forefront of the series, coming to blows like that would be crucial. Their clash represents the entire conflict of the 1,000-year Blood War arc laid bare, and that's why it's so vital. And I mean, really, what's the point in having Uryu side with the sternritter if you're never going to let him fight Ichigo, if you're never going to take that betrayal to its logical, both dramatic and emotional conclusion? It's the duel we're all waiting for. Plus, if Uryu really has just killed Senjumaru, then Ichigo and the others will be truly despairing over his allegiance. Now, you might be thinking even with Uryu's recent power-up, he wouldn't stand a chance against Ichigo, and that might be true, but there are extra factors to consider here. First of all, Ichigo would obviously never fight to kill Uryu, and secondly, by that logic, Ichigo may as well fight no one in this arc but Yhwach arc, and that's basically what happens in the source material, and that's already kind of disappointing. But this also gives Uryu yet another chance to display not only his power, but his loyalty too, by battling his closest friends out in the open. Uryu's brief skirmish with Ichigo comes far too late in the source material to matter at all, and feels like it was included out of obligation more than anything else, especially since Uryu is basically outed as not actually being a bad guy by the time that fight happens. If the anime really wants to heighten the drama, the tragedy, and the sense of betrayal, and get to the very nexus of this conflict, then having Uryu take on Ichigo in a way that feels serious and dangerous would be awesome to see. After all, it's the ultimate point of no return for Uryu. But Uryu isn't the only character who would benefit from this. As I mentioned a minute ago, Ichigo is in desperate need of fights, and he's missing major tentpole battles against important antagonists in the 1,000-year Blood War arc in general. You know what? Why stop there? Let's get Orihime, Chad, and even Ganju involved as well. Again, they, specifically Chad and Ganju, have absolutely nothing to do in this arc, so having everyone team up to fight Uryu would give them a chance to maybe show off a new ability or two. Like with Ukitake before, Aizen is another character who is supposedly getting new scenes in part 3, which is very exciting, but also a little confusing. I really don't know what else Aizen can do in this part of the story. Like Ukitake, his relevance in part 3 is mostly contained to one big sequence, but unlike Ukitake, Aizen has very little options due to the fact that, well, he can't move. He goes where Chair Summer goes at this point in the story, so what extra scenes can he really have? Well, first and foremost, there are the character interactions. New scenes that don't require Aizen to go anywhere else. Aizen has some great discussions with the Gotei 13 when his presence is revealed, but there are definitely a few characters I wish he'd spoken to. Characters like Kisuke or Shinji, for example, so I'd be more than happy to get some additional conversations added in. Outside of that though, I could see the anime extending Aizen's reintroduction sequence somewhat. Perhaps Aizen attempts to mess with Kyoraku's head down in Muken, leading to a creepy scene deep within the darkness before he's finally revealed. And then there's Aizen's crowning moment, where he helps rescue the Gotei 13 from the Soul King's overflowing power, which has taken the form of an army of eyeball monsters. This battle scene could be extended as well, featuring more of a resistance from the Gotei 13 at first, making it clearer that they are being totally overrun before Aizen swoops in to rescue them, using his power to fend off the creatures for a bit longer. Interestingly, it's possible one of Aizen's future scenes may have already been changed. After Aizen rescues the Shinigami, he's meant to be knocked out cold by Sternritter Yu Nananajaku. However, Kubo has already drawn Nanana's death art as of the end of episode 25. So does this mean Nanana has been written out of the story early? And if so, how is that going to change that future scene with Aizen? Maybe he's just simply not going to be knocked out at all. And then there's a possibility that Aizen will get some new scenes much later in the core. He does show up again very briefly during Kyoraku's battle with Leal, commenting on Leal's power raining down upon the Seirete. But what if we get to see Aizen decimating some of the Leal birds with his raw Reiatsu? Maybe one of them approaches him curiously and is instantly destroyed. Either way, more Aizen is both an exciting prospect and a difficult one to figure out for sure, but regardless, we will be getting more of him. Then, once the battle finds its way to Varvelt as of chapter 628, we're treated to the duel between Hashwolf and Basby, as well as the Friend Saga flashback featuring the Lichtreich and the earliest days, the formation of the Sternritter. I would like the actual fight itself to be a little bit longer, though ultimately the battle just exists to show us the history of these characters, so that's really where the emphasis should be placed. I've said it before that I absolutely love the insight and detail we are given in the Friend Saga, but that it stops too soon. Right before things are getting good, in fact. We've glimpsed the war of 1,000 years ago now, yes, but I would love for the series to dive even deeper. I saw a comment from series director Taguchi the other day on Reddit where he noted that they asked Kubo for detailed backstories on the Quincy's, Yuha Bark, and other characters, but that information won't ever be revealed to the public. I can only hope he's joking, as the Sternritter in particular are in desperate need of fleshing out. Sure, not every Sternritter needs a backstory, and already most of them didn't get one. The anime hasn't added any new histories for these individual villains yet. In fact, it's taken some away, in the case of Royd and Lloyd, but it doesn't really need to. However, I would love to get more information on the wider Sternritter faction in general. I want to see more familiar faces from 1,000 years ago cropping up in the Friend flashback to give us a better idea of who was around and who partook in that first war. As a faction, the Vandenreich is in dire need of additional context and lore, and I hope that the Friend flashback is able to cover at least 2 episodes in order to give us what we need, outside of just showing Hashwolf and Basby's relationship. That can easily remain the focus and the core driver of the narrative, but there's no reason why we can't see more. For example, why introduce that new Quincy girl with the machine gun back in episode 24 if she's never going to be seen again? Diving into the internal machinations and politicking of the Quincy's from 1,000 years ago would be fantastic to behold. The Friend Saga ends just as the Sternritter are getting going, as we see Basby has joined their ranks. Maybe in the anime we'll see Basby make a few alliances with familiar characters, or we'll get another, much earlier meeting of the Sternritter featuring younger versions of characters we know from the present day, like Askin, Kirge, and Robert, for example. Well, I'm optimistic, but who knows? The Friend Saga may remain exactly the same, though I think that would be a hugely wasted opportunity. With the battle in Varvelt now underway, there's potential here for a few smaller fights to be shown in the first half of the showdown. While they don't stand a chance against him whatsoever, I'd like to see exactly how Lil Toto and Giselle planned to face Yuha Bark as part of their uprising, and how quickly he ended up destroying them. Secondly, it's time to let the Espada do a little something more. Grimjo rushes off to fight Askin early in the Varvelt battle, and it would be awesome to see them actually fight. However, unlike Askin's future encounter with Ichigo, you do see the entire thing play out here, so it leaves little room for interpretation, but regardless, they could add in a new scene or two. Maybe either Ichigo or Nell actually teams up with Grimjo to try and take Askin down, much to Grimjo's annoyance. The Urankar certainly need more to do, so personally I'd love to see it be Nell that tries to fight Askin alongside Grimjo, but it's another situation where it's tough to find any real wiggle room for them before Askin manages to escape. And then finally, carrying on from that, it would be amazing to get some kind of an actual fight between Ichigo and Askin. The sudden reveal of Ichigo's easy defeat at the hands of Askin didn't go down well with parts of the community. After the two of them prepare to clash, they aren't seen again until Ichigo is lying face down on the ground, having been poisoned by Askin's shrift. While I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with this outcome, Askin's shrift is totally broken, but more than that, he fights in a manner that Ichigo simply isn't well equipped to deal with. I do think it would be an easier pill to swallow if we actually saw the battle that led to it. And there is nothing to say that it has to be a tricksy one-sided stomp as opposed to an actual fight. Once again, giving Ichigo more fights in this arc is never going to be a bad thing, and the same goes for my boy Askin too, but if we get to see that Ichigo actually went down swinging rather than just being instantly beaten as the source material seemingly implies, it might make the entire thing more palatable. The thing is, Askin looks to be totally unharmed, which also didn't help matters, but that doesn't have to be the case at all. Ichigo could easily land a massive Getsuga or two on Askin, seriously wounding the sternritter, only for Askin to heal himself using his newly acquired immunity to Ichigo's power in the exact same way he does later against Yoruichi and Yushiro. Basically, I think there's a lot that can be done to try and make Ichigo look much better here, which makes sense to me considering how powerful he is right now and the fact that he's on his way to the final battle. Having Ichigo turned into a doormat just before the final battle does hype Askin up for sure, but it diminishes the main character as a result, and the anime has a chance now to flesh out that sequence. This next entry is combining two separate points, but they're effectively asking for the same thing, and that's flashbacks for the individual Schutzstaffel members. Now, I mentioned earlier that I don't expect or even need backstories for every member of the Sternritter, and that's true, but I do think the Schutzstaffel members absolutely deserve it. Not only are they major enemies with huge fights under their belts, but they're the final villains of Bleach itself. All four of them are interesting characters in their own right, and I would love for them to be fleshed out. For this video, I'm only discussing Pernida and Leal, as I think they're the only two whose fights will appear in part 3, but I could be wrong. Now, where Pernida is concerned, we've already actually had a scrap of new backstory thrown our way. We've learned when Yhwach first gained control over the left arm of the Soul King, and so that explains why Pernida believes it's always been a Quincy and why it serves Yhwach. But there's always room for more where the pieces of the Soul King are concerned, and I'd love to see how it was not only separated from Yhwach later on, but how it integrated with the wider Vandenreich, if at all. Mayuri and Nemu's battle with Pernida honestly doesn't need changing. I would just love some additional content. I think the perfect place for a flashback would be when Pernida's true nature is first revealed and its hood is destroyed. As Mayuri looks upon the left arm and notes that he knows what it is, that would be the time I would include the flashback. Then there's Leal Barrow. Again, as the leader of the Schutzstaffel and the first Quincy to receive a shrift, he deserves a flashback. I want to know what drives his zealotry, how and why he was the first Quincy to be blessed by Yhwach, and what the circumstances were of that. Was it 1,000 years ago or much more recent? Again, his fight with Kyoraku and Nanao is excellent, but there is room for a flashback in there too. I suppose the best time for it in this fight would be either when Leal is struggling with Kyoraku's bankai, or just before his head is destroyed when you think he's actually going to die. And so at this point, there's likely not much of the core left, but there is still room for one scene to be expanded on, depending on where the core ends, that is, and that's a discussion we'll get into in a minute. If the core takes us right the way through to the very end of Kyoraku vs. Leal, then I'd like to see Izuru's only scene expanded on. Personally, while I dislike what becomes of Leal, I think he deserved a conclusive end, so it would be great to see the resurrected Izuru step up and actually kill all of the Leal birds on screen before he makes his next move. Perhaps linking back to an earlier entry, Izuru kills all but one who manages to escape, only to run into Aizen, whose mere presence obliterates the chirping bird once and for all. This ties into a broader question about the core itself that I brought up a second ago. Where will it end? Core 2 ended in a somewhat abrupt and random place, which means that really we could end with any scene. I do think we'll see Kyoraku's bankai in this core based on that initial teaser trailer that seemed to hint towards his backstory, which means we'll likely get the majority of the fight between him and Leal. I guess it could end with the reveal of Shinken Hakyoken, but I wonder if we might just get a new scene to cap things off. For example, we see Yhwach preparing to enact his plan from his throne atop Varvelt as everyone else continues to rush desperately towards the epicenter, ending Core 3 on a huge cliffhanger. This would be good for a few reasons. It would inject some urgency into the Varvelt sub-arc. After all, Yhwach just seems to sort of abandon his plan to destroy all three worlds after becoming the new Soul King for a while, only acting on it after he then leaves for the Soul Society, which I don't understand why he doesn't just do that immediately. So, to end Part 3, showing us where everybody is as we race closer as the clock counts down to the doom of the universe would be an awesome way to lead into the final core. Finally, for the last entry, now that we've covered what will be potentially the entire core, I just want to throw out some wildcard suggestions. These are ideas for additions that don't happen in the source material at all, but that I'd like to see in some form or another. Firstly, Komamura. You knew he was going to be here somewhere, but in what capacity could he return? In the source material, Komamura is last seen when Kisuke gives the gathered Gotei 13 members an update on the whereabouts of missing divisions in chapter 612. Komamura and Iba are seen surrounded by Soldat and have declined any medical assistance. Now, there's no reason to suspect this will be any different in the anime, but Komamura and Iba did get a surprising extra scene after Yhwach ascended to the royal palace, so maybe they really will make it to the stronghold with everyone else. It kind of seems like from that inclusion the anime might have plans for these characters. Either way, no matter what happens, I would like a more definitive update on where they are and what's going on with them. Then there's Rose and Kensei, who also frankly deserve a much better fate than that they received. In fact, as far as the anime is concerned, we've already seen the last of them both now until the epilogue, which is crazy. I'd love for them to be healed faster. We see Mayuri place them both inside his de-zombification chambers, and we know he takes the chambers with Hitsugaya and Matsumoto to the royal palace for some reason, so why not the Vizard captains too? I know it's asking a lot to allow them to be involved in the final battle, but hell, even if they just battle some Soldat, at least give them the chance to do something cool against the Quincy after being rescued by Mayuri. And next up on our list of wildcards, how about those Fullbringers? It's awesome to see them again, and both Riruka and Yukio will appear in Part 3, but based on their time in the source material, it will literally be for a single episode. Let's give them something else to do. I'm not suggesting they go with Ichigo and the others because I just don't think that's realistic, but it would be cool to see them set up a perimeter or something around Yukio's box and fight off some Soldat at some point. Remember, unless the Hell arc happens, this is the last hurrah for a lot of these characters, so I would love to see them fight, no matter how briefly, no matter how insignificant, just one more time. And then, maybe, we get a tease of Ginjo and Tsukishima's arrival, as Yukio presumably helps them into Varvelt somehow, since he is seen with them when they arrive on the scene to help Ichigo much later on. To be honest, Tsukishima stepping foot into the Quincy City with Book of the End would be an awesome cliffhanger for the entire core. Speaking of cliffhangers for the core and good places to end the season, how about the arrival of Isshin and Ryuken into Varvelt? Now, in the source material, this particular moment doesn't happen until chapter 674, deep into Core 4. But if the anime is planning on expanding Isshin and Ryuken's roles in the finale at all, which would be amazing, then what better way to get that started than by bringing forward their introduction significantly? Like I said, this is a wild card, which is why I didn't bring it up with my earlier ideas for how they might end the core, but I would love to see it nonetheless. And there you have it. With the reveal that Core 3's pacing is going to be much slower, these are roughly 13 new scenes I'd love to see added to the story. Chapter 626, The Holy Newborn, is going to appear approximately halfway through the season, so there's a lot of extra room to play with this time around. But that's it for the video, guys. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about the new scenes and additions that I would like to see. Do you agree with them? Would you like to see them as well? Let me know if there is anything that you would love to see that I didn't bring up. As always, I'd love to know what you think down in the comments below. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. I couldn't do this without you, so I just wanted to give you a huge shout out and say a massive thank you. As always, if you like what I do here over on YouTube and you want to support me that little extra step as well, you can do just that by supporting me over on Patreon to get your name in the credits like this and to get every video I release absolutely ad-free. Alright guys, but until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.